in the newsroom. Right now, the French president is in New York, François Hollande, at the United Nations. He's given a speech before the General Assembly. He's conferring with his peers on Syria and Mali. When he gets home, he'll have an unpleasant surprise waiting. For the first time since 1999, France has now climbed above the symbolic 3 million unemployed mark. And with layoffs at the likes of pharmaceutical giant Sanofi, that number is not going to be going south anytime soon. It may be cold comfort for Socialist Hollande, but high unemployment is nothing new. The last time France experienced anything close to resembling full employment was the early 1970s. And even when growth is high, the jobless rate never seems to dip below 8%. Yes, there's a crisis on in Europe. In fact, French unemployment is still well below the Eurozone average of more than 11%. But with a chart like this one, you have to wonder, is it time for the French to radically rethink labor and labor relations? Today in the France 24 debate, why France isn't working. And with us, Mario Schellberg. He's president of SGN Telecom. It's a small telecommunications firm. You're looking to hire people, but you have some doubts. We'll be talking about it in a moment, about the hurdles that you face. Also with us, Agnès Michel, of the French Green Party. Welcome back to the debate. And welcome back as well to Mark Dean of the Bloomberg News Agency. The France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and on Twitter. You can find us at François F24. Before we talk about SGN Telecom, let's start with the story of Sanofi. It's the world's fourth largest pharmaceutical company. It's based in Paris. Last week, at first, it talked of 2,300 job cuts, then 1,400 job cuts. Pharmaceuticals, huge for French industry. It's part of a €2 billion belt tightening for a company that employs more than 110,000 people worldwide. Now, after a meeting Monday night at the presidential palace, Sanofi agreeing to reduce those job cuts to just 900 jobs, but that's still not enough to appease French public opinion. Mark Dean, it turns out that Sanofi posted a €5.7 billion profit last year, and it doesn't really hold sway. Why are they cutting jobs?
Well, you know, that's the question that always gets asked in France. And I think that there is a very rational response to that. You know, you don't want to let a company wait until things are, until it's losing money before it addresses any problems that it has. Now, I'm not here to judge the internal problems of Sanofi, and I'm not a particular expert on that. But I do think that this link between the actual profits a company is generating and whether it can cut jobs is overstated in France. And I think that bear in mind, a lot of those profits are not generated within France.
5.7 billion. It's not chump change.
No, it's not chump change at all. But the question is whether the operations that Sanofi is looking at are themselves profitable, if they have a future. It's not right to wait to a situation where you wouldn't want Sanofi to be Peugeot, where it was losing money, and has been losing bleeding cash for a number of years, and then trying to address the problem. It's much harder.
Agnès Michel, your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting to talk about Peugeot and Sanofi in the same phrase, because actually I think it's interesting to see that you have those plans of reducing employees in many firms. The big ones are those in area that are going backwards. Cars is not a very future kind of industry, in France in particular. And about
pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals, thank you. It's we know that we have a huge problem in research and development in France. We have like only 10% of the medicines that are actually sold that are effective. So we are talking about more than unemployment. In this case, it's a conversion of those kind of or retraining in those kind of those industries. I mean.
So you understand, you take on board the point that you have to restructure and maybe lose jobs before things get bad.
Well, they should have talked with the government before, because now they are announcing that, and we always complain about the government announcing big plans without consulting enterprises, and at the same time the firms are doing exactly the same. So why creating such a social crisis instead of trying to find out a way to maybe develop themselves in a better way for medicine?
All right, that's an interesting point. Maria Schelberg, giving the government a heads up on what you're doing and vice versa. And we saw at the outset that there was this meeting on Monday between the government. It happens at the presidential palace. That doesn't happen everywhere, where the government, where key industry decisions like how many people to lay off are talked about at the presidential palace. Do you think that the French way of doing business, where the state has an eye in on what's going on, is the right way to go about things?
Well, I'm not sure that this is the best way to go on, but I think we should all kind of learn from each other. Other countries do it pretty right as well. I'm not talking about Germany because I'm half German as well, but we should definitely kind of...
Germany, in a sense, is similar to France, right? You have you have big labor unions and...
Yeah, we do. I mean, there are a lot of helps as well for people who are looking for jobs, but the system is actually kind of the same as in France. It's maybe a little bit better in some points, but I think we have a lot to improve, definitely. As you see, that small companies kind of really have difficulties to grow and go on like they like.
We'll talk about small companies in a moment, but Mark, it was 2,300. They sit down with people at the presidential palace, goes down to 900. What are your thoughts about the fact that the government plays this sort of active role when it comes to layoff plans?
Look, it is of course quite astonishing for someone who comes from the Anglophone world, that this happens almost systematically. On the other hand, it's not unheard of. Even in the U.S., when GM is going under, when Chrysler is going under, the government steps in. These are not, it's not a total laissez-faire environment. Really, the concern in France is more that the government is constantly interfering, and that, actually has an overall general effect of dissuading people from hiring and leading to concern that you cannot do anything in France without the government, even in the most rational circumstances. And I think that's the more general concern. In the case of Sanofi, I mean, I agree perfectly with what my neighbor has said here. The concern about Sanofi is that, this is a company that should be investing in research and development, and that should be, have a lot of future. And, the concern is more about where that investment is going. Let's be very happy that, Sanofi has billions of euros of profit, but let there be room for them to reinvest.
Let's hear some reactions to the Sanofi affair, including a man you're going to hear more than once in this debate, Socialist Party stalwart Arnaud Montebourg. His job description, by the way, changed when the Socialists came to power from mere industry minister to Minister of Productive Recovery.
We have reminded Sanofi of the fact they should behave like a patriotic company. This morning, they finally offered to cut 900 jobs instead of the 1,390 jobs they had previously announced as part of their restructuring plan.
It's green lights all the way for them. 9 billion of net income, 5 billion euros in profits. Really, this doesn't justify job cuts.
All right, and one more reaction. This one comes from Twitter. Paul says, a company that makes 5 billion in profits like Sanofi has the right to restructure, says Montebourg. Flip-flopper? ? Is this going to haunt the socialist government? They've accepted one layoff plan already, a big one with Peugeot, now a second.
I think we should help the socialists to change their point of view on economy, because they just react as the former government in reaction of what is happening. We know that we have been living since 30 years reduction in industrial works jobs, and that has to be changed, but in national consultation, because we can't have it only trying to push on young entrepreneur like you. We have old industries. We have a very different territory with a historical area in industry, and so the socialists should be taking a little bit of time to think of what they want for French development in industry and other area. We could talk about agriculture as well.
Political time can be cruelly short, though.
Yes, the thing is that it's like pouring water on I don't know how, a bath with a whole, I don't know how to translate.
Bathtub,
yeah, a leaky bathtub, and it won't work. Actually, I know it's hard to say that, but some industries will fail, like mines before, and we should just try to figure out how to retrain people, but how to retrain as well those firms, because some are going to die. It's just life, but they should really have a global view, and that's what is lacking right now in the government.
All right, you mentioned there, both you and Martine, Agnès, were mentioning Peugeot. You could consider, I suppose, an old industry in that regard. Peugeot announcing it was shutting its big factory north of Paris, the government forcing the car maker to reconsider. But several months later, the state backtracking, and the Aulnay-sous-Bois assembly line will indeed close for good in 2014. However, Martine, they're keeping open a plant they have in Spain instead. It was the choice, really, between France and Spain. And in this case, Peugeot decided that it was more profitable to build cars in Spain than it is in France.
Well, that's part of the game, and why should why are these jobs necessarily just why should France necessarily have a right to these jobs? Again, I don't know the specifics of what was decided in that case, but I think what Agnès is saying is very sensible. What the government needs is an industrial strategy for the future, and to put to orient public investment and private investment and education around certain key industries that are going to provide growth in the future. It's not up to... The problem is when the industry minister and the president are running after every factory closure, even if it's a chicken factory in Brittany, which is done, and that's where they're spending their own time and their own effort,
money.
and money, and other things go by the wayside. It'd be much better to have a proactive strategy to say, this is what we're going to do. It's going to take 5-10 years, but this is how it works. That is essentially what Germany has done over the past decade, and it works out much better, because if all you're doing is limiting the job cuts, it's a very reactive and not very productive strategy.
All right, well, one place where the industry minister won't be spending his time this Thursday when he goes to open the auto show will be the stands of Korean car makers Hyundai and Kia, where workers have been striking against the 12-hour workday. Arnaud Montebourg talking about social dumping. When you heard the minister there earlier talk about the companies have to be patriotic, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got to be a little bit patriotic in some way to give the chance actually to the people living in your country to build up things that they actually know how to do. And I think French, the German, every country has the chance to have a population who can build up very nice things in like different kind of...
Focus on what you're good at.
Exactly. You should focus on what you're good at and give the chance to the small ones to grow, and I think that's the future as well.
Focus on what you're good at. It was at one point, and it still is, Martine, though, those old industries, not, as you were mentioning, mining, which perhaps is it was a battle that was lost in the 1970s, but car makers, they can roll with the punches, and industries like that. Why is it that in France it seems that it's so rigid?
Well, I think it's partly culture. But it hasn't always been this way. France had a trade surplus for a decade up until the early 2000s, and France is perfectly capable of paying its way in the world, earning a living, and exporting. But you need the right policies in place. Certainly, the rigidity of the French labor code is a problem. We were discussing before whether our telecoms entrepreneur here wants to hire someone. It's very difficult. It's simply very complicated. And to a large extent, these in France in particular, and notably compared to other countries, and a lot of the problem is that these questions need to be depoliticized in France, and a pragmatic approach needs to be taken.
Agnès Michel, the tone of the presidential election campaign was not for depoliticizing labor relations. The big issues were taxing the rich, were things like rolling back the raising of the retirement age for those who'd work a very long period of time. In this climate, can the coalition between the socialists and the Greens afford to, as Mark was saying, depoliticize this discussion?
I have an issue with this depoliticization because we have been having an economy that is really politicized since 30 years or so. We have been said that we have only one model of development that is working, which is a new version of capitalism, and I'm not really sure that it's working. Actually, if you see the state of France and many countries, because we are talking about Spain with Peugeot, but Spain, it's quite hard nowadays to be living in Spain, especially if you're young, because you can't find a job. And in Germany, which is a model for many, you have many people living with 400 euros a month, which is not very much. It's not enough. And so we see that we have a limit to this system, which is quite political, actually. And what I would like to do, what we would like to do, participating in this government, is trying to make a change, in this conception, this unique conception of economy. I'm not following what Arnaud Montebourg is saying about patriotism because, well, I'm ecologist. I'm really not a chauvinist. It's complicated for me. It's a local situation, a question of local economy, and try to find not what we are doing as France in the repetition of producing all around the world, but what do we need in France, in every region? What do we need to produce? How? And considering the people that are living here, that are consuming here in every region, what do we do as a production?
Start from the bottom up. We're going to pick up on that point when we return. You're watching the France 24 debate.